I'm Matt Egan, Director of Federal Affairs at States Trust, the federal project of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Joining me today is Grant Newman, the Director of Government Relations at the Immigration Accountability Project. Today we're going to be talking about Biden's recent executive order from this month, and as well as his recent order today, as of this recording, on his new amnesty program and everything in between. Grant, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Matt.
So what can you tell us about this new executive order from Biden that he released on June 4th?
Yeah, it just came out, or the newest, the June 4th.
June 4th, yeah.
We're calling it's not an executive order, it's a proclamation. We're calling it, and joking, the Langford Proclamation, because it mirrors a lot of what Senator Langford and Senator Murphy came up with earlier in the year. So they've got this idea of feigning closing the border. They have a threshold of about 2,500, and if they're getting daily crossings at 2,500 or more, then the border, in theory, shuts down. The problem is they've packed this with so many loopholes, it makes it effectively non-effective. And a great example is people who show up that are unaccompanied children don't count. So that actually baits children to try and come to the border because they know they can get in and they don't count towards that number. Another trick is that they have this thing that they're using called the CBP One app. I know you guys are familiar with it, where you effectively have an app that you can program your illegal entry. You can schedule it. So you can, as long as you use that app and show up at the border at a port of entry, it doesn't matter. And so they're effectively forcing people away from illegal entry points, like crossing between ports of entry to ports of entry, so that they don't count. Now, the other cool thing is that when that border is shut down under the regulation, they've got all of these people who don't count. They can come in if you're a U.S. citizen. You can come in if you've got a green card, if you've got, any of these visas. But then there are two extra provisions at the end that are so great, I figured I'd just type them up and have them and read them to you guys. So one exception is aliens are permitted to enter by the Secretary of Homeland Security acting through the CBP immigration officer based on the totality of the circumstances, including consideration of significant law enforcement, officer and public safety, urgent humanitarian public health interests at any time or at the time of the entry or encounter that warranted permitting the non-citizen to enter. So that's almost everyone.
Yeah, any reason they can think of.
Right.
Yeah, if you can come up with it. Yeah.
This administration's used that humanitarian equivalent exception already for their parole programs. That's how they're letting everybody in. But then they didn't stop there. It was like they realized we need to have an even bigger loophole than the one we've already programmed in. And so it includes aliens, quote, permitted to enter by the Secretary of Homeland Security acting through a CBP immigration officer due to operational considerations at the time of entry or encounter that warranted permitting the non-citizen to enter. So as I read that, it's, well, they're just too many people, so we're going to let them enter. At the end of the day, it's not going to shut the border down. And what we've seen is it hasn't really shut the border down. We know that in the San Diego sector, it was something like 72% according to the New York Post, were actually being released after being apprehended, even though this shutdown's in effect. But this morning, what we had seen from Bill Malugin, if you're not following him on Twitter, you should, really, really good on-the-ground reporting about what's occurring at the border. Numbers have gone down. In terms of daily apprehensions, we're looking at that 2,500 number. This order shuts off at 1,500 a day. It's actually dropped down pretty substantially. They were just saying yesterday we were at 2,070 illegal immigrants that were apprehended as part of this. And that's a really, really, really low number. We were way over that for months and months and months. And part of that is because, maybe this order is having some kind of effect. But what we've seen time and time again under this administration and previous administrations is perception matters almost as much as the law does. So when the Biden administration said, when they announced their Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela parole program, numbers of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans dropped precipitously at the border for 2 months. And then when the word got back that, oh, by the way, they're actually still letting people in, they're still releasing people, the numbers went right back up. So in addition to having an illegal parole program that was running here, we were actually still having people showing up in the same numbers as before on the border. So the jury's out. Is this order going to have a long-standing effect? I doubt it. But right now, those numbers are falling at the lowest level since January of 2021.
Yeah, and that 2070 number doesn't take into account those numbers you already said that were exemptions. So who knows if we'll ever find out what that number is, which is just terrifying on its face to think about. And then we also have to think about the seasonal changes that normally occur with the border as well. As it gets, yeah, exactly. As it gets hotter, less people show up at the border because it becomes incredibly dangerous when it's already incredibly dangerous.
Right.
So those numbers already dipped during the summer. So this all seems to be part of a strategic play then. So I guess kind of building right there off of that, 3.5 years Biden's been in office. He hasn't done a darn thing other than pontificate regarding the border. So why now?
It's got to be the election. I mean, that's everything. That's the only thing that makes sense. On the one hand, your gut instinct is to be encouraged by the administration when they're actually doing something on the border. But at the same time, I think, when my kids have destroyed my living room, when they finally get around to cleaning it, I'm thankful. But they've made the mess to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. The mess wouldn't be there without them. And so they've did this odd gaslighting thing where the administration is saying, oh my gosh, we wanted to secure the border the whole time. Ignore the fact that for the previous 3 years, and especially in the first year, we effectively dismantled all enforcement at the border. All of these things happened because of us. Like, we've dismantled it. Mm-hmm. Now they're suddenly saying, we really want to get control of this. We need Congress. We're going to do what we can. I mean, look at just the past few months. They were saying they needed this Langford deal to actually shut down the border. And yet they've come out with an executive order or an executive proclamation effectively doing what that bill says it was going to do. So, I mean, it's about shoring up, I think, the administration going into an election where immigration is one of the number one issues.
No, I think you're 100% right there. And I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into the White House kind of obfuscating on the issue constantly. Yeah. One day, we don't have the authority to do anything. The next day, we're doing something. And then we have President Biden, at the State of the Union saying he needs a Langford Mayorkas thing. There's nothing he can do. And he inherited a border crisis.
Right.
Why so much confusion? Why go about this way with the American people?
Yeah, I don't know, other than to try and buy cover. We know the president has, tons of authorities that he can use to secure the border. Obviously, President Trump had zero help from Congress going into this. In the first 2 years, there wasn't a lot that got done. And with Democrats in Congress, they didn't do anything. So the secure border that we saw in the last 2 years of the Trump administration came purely from Trump taking action without the need of Congress.
We've only seen bad things from this administration on this issue in particular, but I think we can say that just across the board. Mm-hmm. So what legal authorities does the president have at his disposal? In D.C., we talk a lot of inside baseball. We say things like 212F. What does that mean to somebody who's not familiar with immigration law?
So 212F, it's INA 212F. That's the Immigration and Nationality Act 212F. Immigration is really annoying, and this is the annoying lawyer nerdy part coming in. 212F or 8 U.S.C. 1182F, the Title 8 U.S. Code 1182F. There's an authority there that's been there for a really long time, that's been used by basically every president in a different varying way, that is about as broad a restrictive authority as you can get in immigration law. And I have it here because everyone should know this and have it memorized by now. It's called suspension of entry or imposition of restrictions by the president. So whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interest of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. That's about as broad as it can get. It can be limited, it can be broad, it can be applied to any category, individual, anything. So the most recent proclamation on the border, the now second most recent proclamation on the border, specifically cites that authority. The president didn't seem to know he had it, even though he'd used it within the first couple days of the administration, when during COVID they were using this authority by proclamation to keep out individuals from countries that had high COVID levels. So that the president has used that authority. Now the problem is these authorities are really, really important. They're great. But there's so many of them, you can actually use multiple authorities to kind of work together to address potential loopholes. So there's an outstanding legal case involving 212F that the Biden administration didn't take to the Supreme Court that leaves a kind of gray area into how far they can go to 212F, how that applies to asylum, how that applies to it's an issue, which is why they have other authorities they can use too. They can catch and release. So the law requires the president or the Department of Homeland Security to take into custody everyone, that they're supposed to remain into custody pending their removal proceeding. They're not doing that. They're releasing everybody. And you think, like, how does ending catch and release stop that? Like, well, the bottom line is when people realize if they go to the U.S., they're going to stay in detention. They're not going to be released. They're not going to get work authorization. People are going to stop coming to the degree that they're coming. It's the same thing with their illegal use of parole. They shouldn't be abusing parole. They shouldn't be giving parole out in these kind of blanket parole programs. If they need to, very, 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 very limited case-by-case basis in real urgent humanitarian circumstances, not just we've decided that everyone from this country can qualify, or anyone who gets released from custody who's waiting for an asylum proceeding gets to qualify.
Now, before you go on, I want to hit something that you were saying.
Yeah.
You said once when they know they're not going to be detained, they continue to come, and you're 100% right. And then what's the first thing they do when they aren't detained and they're released? They call their family and tell them that they made it.
Right.
And it continues the problem. It continues the flow, and that same issue happens with parole as well. Sorry for interrupting, but I think that's a really important piece to add in there.
It's super important, and it's part of why I'm concerned with the proclamation, with the new executive action today. We've seen this time and time again. When folks are not immigration. The people that are coming up across the border aren't immigration lawyers. They don't know who does or does not qualify for things. What they hear is it's time to get in, and people get in. Every time we see amnesty proposed, every time, executively, in Congress, votes, anything, when amnesty's in the news, numbers increase at the border because people think that means that they can go in now. So I would not be. I mean, that's effectively what's happening now. We know that the apprehension numbers at the border were creeping up as Trump was heading out. They all knew the president was very clear. The incoming president was very clear. He was going to shut down enforcement. You were going to be able to stay. There were all these promises of amnesty, and the numbers reflected that. And that gets to the detention part. The flip side is reinstituting remain in Mexico. It's an option in the law. The president has the option to detain everyone, or if they're claiming asylum, for example, return them back to the country they arrived from to await their proceeding there. It was super effective under the Trump administration to do this because, again, people realized I'm not going to just be able to get in to the U.S. after saying the magic words to get asylum or to claim asylum. And the numbers really fell off. There really weren't that many people enrolled in Remain in Mexico because people just stopped coming. That's a clear authority. It's in the law. It's been upheld. They can do it again. This administration chose to eliminate that program, and we were seeing the after effects of it.
No, you're hitting an important point there, and that's that we know over 80% of the people applying for asylum would not be eligible if they actually had to go through the process and had that discovery, which is partly why the administration wants to release them as fast as possible to continue that flow, and it's why MPP worked so well. So follow-up question really on this. Mexico just elected a new president who's just as bad as her predecessor. MPP requires the cooperation of Mexico in some way, shape, or form. Do you think we're going to be able to force that cooperation?
I think it's an authority I didn't touch on, but you're totally right. There are foreign policy powers that can be accessed as leverage points to do these things. The Trump administration did that. The Biden administration has that power. They can use foreign policy leverage to make things happen. They did it with the Haitians that were under the bridge early on in the administration. They worked diplomatic channels to basically get people flown back to Haiti. And so there are things that they can do. I'm not sure if this administration's willing to do them. We saw reports early on the past couple months that they'd had a deal with Mexico where Mexico was going to effectively meter the entry of people across the southern border because they do have the ability to crack down on their side too and to take control, as much control as they can from the cartels. But it demonstrates there's something going on. They have channels that they could use. I don't know anything about the new president. Not super promising, obviously. But I also don't have a lot of faith in this administration to come up with a really good deal. But they could totally use their foreign policy powers to do something there.
Yeah. Well, I strongly suggest everybody read up on our TPPF research on the new president. She's even worse than the last, an open socialist looking to continue the legacy of AMLO in Mexico and vowing to not assist a conservative administration in the United States on basically any issue. We are going to have options at our disposal. We know Biden's not going to do anything. He's going to roll over just like he has on everything when it comes to foreign policy. It's going to be up to the next administration to step in and take a hard stand. And we have to remember, we hold all the cards when negotiating with the Mexican government.
Yeah.
They rely on the U.S. economy, not the other way around. If we lose the Mexican economy, it would hurt us. But if they lose the United States economy, they collapse. So we always have to remember that, and we generally don't like to play hardball. We want to be nice, but we can't afford that anymore.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of bills, a lot of options exploring things like taxing remittances. If you're getting a certain number of illegal entries, we're going to tax remittances back to Mexico up to a certain percent. If they keep coming, we're going to keep increasing that tax. Alternatively, Mexico can stop facilitating the border crisis and actually crack down on it, and then maybe we can play a little bit easier there.
Well, said, love this tangent kind of into Mexico because it is important. We generally talk about the border and we don't talk about the country that all these people are having to flow through in order to get here. People are coming from over 160 countries, but they all seem to be flowing through Mexico, and there's a reason for that. They're not coming through Canada for the most part. I mean, we have a facilitator. We have the Mexican government working with cartels to make a lot of money off of a migration crisis into the United States that they are manufacturing. Yeah. So I guess last question, kind of following up on this one. So why the smoke and mirrors from Biden? Why is he trying to act like he's tough on border then? I mean, this may seem like an obvious question, but I think it's something we really need to flesh out a little bit.
Yeah, we do. I do think it still comes back to this whole gaslighting thing. I think you can see the Democrats have been really good messaging on this in terms of consistency, blaming Republicans, blaming those that are border hawks for killing this bad Langford deal that we've alluded to a couple times, and saying, that was the greatest, it was the most strong deal in the history of the universe. And when you actually are following the issue, you compared it to H.R. 2, the House passed bill that was basically a comprehensive, I don't want to say comprehensive, it's a dirty word, but a complete approach to addressing all of these issues on the border crisis, effectively saying, we see these loopholes that the administrations have exploited. They've exploited them for decades, never to this level. And what we're going to do is force those loopholes closed and give teeth to states like Texas, who've been so great about suing the administration for violating the law, and give them standing in court. It's the one main hurdle that Texas and other states have faced in suing the administration for clear violations of the law, is running into that standing issue. And so H.R. 2 solves that. The Langford deal would not have done that. The Langford deal was effectively asking the administration what it would like to do. Perhaps the most damning part of it is it was endorsed by Mayorkas, impeached Secretary Mayorkas, and the president. And so the guys that have opened the border have endorsed the border plan. It's clearly not going to work. Whereas they're obviously opposed to H.R. 2 and efforts there to actually force their hand on securing it.
No, you're hitting a big topic. Let's talk about Congress's role in this, because I think that's incredibly important. We can talk about the great things a potential Trump administration, a conservative administration would do, but one day we're going to have another radical leftist in the White House who's going to use what Biden is doing as a blueprint and expand upon it. So we need to talk about Congress doing something to prevent that. You mentioned H.R. 2. Would H.R. 2 hamstring a future leftist administration?
100%. 100%, because not only are you closing the parole loophole, you're mandating MPP. The end of the day, the best way to sum up H.R. 2, in my opinion, is it gives three options for someone who crosses the border illegally. They can be detained, they can be removed, as in terms of removal proceedings, or returned away to Mexico pending their proceeding. There is no catch and release. That is no longer an option. When you do that, border crisis ends. On top of it, you say to states, and by the way, if the administration is still exploiting these loopholes that you've closed, you have standing to sue them. That's what we're looking for. That's how you stop it. Another administration can do a lot of this on their own, but if you really want to hamstring a future administration, that's how you do it. You have passed H.R. 2.
Well, it's 404 days ago, House Republicans passed H.R. 2. It has not received a standalone vote from Chuck Schumer in the Senate. It seems to me, actually, his entire party and everybody on the left is running away from this issue as fast as possible. I personally sat through a border hearing in the House where the Democrats vacated the committee room. In almost 10 years here in Washington, I've never seen that where a party completely just evacuates the committee room because they don't want to talk about an issue. But this one doesn't. And that truly astounding. So they don't want to talk about the Secure the Border Act, H.R. 2. We've talked a lot about the Langford Mayorkas deal, but there's a few things in it I want to kind of hit on a little bit more. Yeah. True or false, Langford Mayorkas would have codified catch and release.
Absolutely. So there's a line in there I highlighted. I don't think it may be somewhere in immigration law. I haven't found it. I found it yet, but as far as I know, it's the most prominent use of this line. They said they were getting rid of catch and release. They were replacing it with something called non-custodial release. And so we're not going to keep you detained. We're going to release you and we're not going to have custody of you. It's catch and release. Yeah. They actually said in there, aliens referred for proceedings under this section shall be released from physical custody and processed in accordance with the procedures in the section. So they actually mandate in the law that they have to be released. And in addition, and aside from setting this ridiculous threshold of 5,000 a day being acceptable before there's any kind of fake border shutdown, there was a minimum of 1,400 illegal aliens that had to be, by law, processed into the country every day. I don't know what that means. I don't know if you don't have 1,400, if you have to go into Mexico and find people, but it was required that they release them into the country. Senator Murphy said in a tweet storm that night when the bill came out, the border never closes. He's right. He's absolutely right. It never closed under that deal. It's just a real shame that that's what Senate Republicans and Democrats were able to come up with together in a room.
Well, I think it gets even worse. So, true or false, the few good provisions in the bill, including the limiting and the shutting down of the border, were the only provisions that expired in the legislation.
Yeah, I think that was right.
I think they expired after 3 years.
Yeah.
I think they were the only parts that expired.
That sounds right. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
This doesn't sound like a winning on the border issue. The number one issue in the country, the issue the left and the president are underwater on, and this was the best that they could negotiate at the time.
Yeah, it should be a warning sign. If you're going to consult with immigration experts, we know a lot. Make sure that the one immigration expert you consult with isn't impeached Secretary Mayorkas.
Seems like good advice. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the breaking news of the day.
Right.
Yeah, so today Biden and Mayorkas announced parole in place. Can you break down what this is?
Yeah, so it's amnesty. It's the administration's exploring new amnesties that it can use to it seems to me pay off what they did a couple weeks ago. So a couple weeks ago, they had this thing that was perceived by the media as a harsh border crackdown. We now know it wasn't. But the bottom line is it scared activists on their left flank. And so as a gift to them, 2 weeks later to the day, they're giving out an amnesty, actually 2 amnesties, it sounds like. The first is this parole in place amnesty. It's supposed to be targeted at people who are in the country illegally, who are a U.S. citizen spouse. And the administration themselves estimate about 500,000 people, with about 50,000 children who will benefit as a result. And we don't have a lot of the details, the nitty gritty, because they didn't have the Federal Register rule posted yet when they made the announcement this morning. But it sounds, I mean, it's clearly unconstitutional. This clearly is not how parole was supposed to be used. It's an expansion on just a tiny little thing in the law that's supposed to be on a case-by-case basis. So it's just this is the same thing the administration did with DACA. They took the line case by case and then they pasted it all through their press releases to prove that it's case by case. But when you announce that this is an entire class of aliens that's eligible for it, it suggests it's not case by case. Picking up a stamp and dropping it one by one is not case by case. You're not actually considering it. We don't know what the criminal bars are. We know that you have to have been in the country for at least 10 years and married as of yesterday to qualify for it. But that's amnesty 1. Amnesty 2, we have even less details on it. So it's being pitched as some way to expedite employment authorization for people who've received DACA. The problem is people who have DACA already have work authorization. So why do they need to come up with a new program to give non-immigrant work visas to people that have DACA? And it's in the little text right after that. It's for DACA and other people who are here illegally. So the under this plan, which we don't actually know what those non-immigrant visas are, but according to the White House and DHS, if you're here illegally and you went to college and you pass whatever the criminal national security bars that they haven't told anyone about are, you can get a fast-paced work authorization to work in the field that you studied in. So it's clearly amnesty. You're taking someone who does not have lawful status and you're giving them lawful status. There's no numerical estimate given by the White House as to what that is, but yeah, double amnesty hit this close to an election during a border crisis.
So, how do we know that what they're saying is true if they say they've been here for 10 years? Especially if they've only had to be, if I show up, I have a marriage license from 3 weeks ago, and I just have a picture of me in front of a house that I lived in 10 years ago that's in the United States, and just say, see, I was here 10 years ago, papers, please. How do we know what's going to qualify? What's the bar?
That's a great question. So during DACA, I came in and started working in immigration right after DACA was announced. I remember seeing all the stories. There were a surprising number of people had homeschool report cards with just an address on them. They were accepting Xbox Live receipts as proof of residency. So you can
online gaming subscription tells you where you live.
Right.
Obviously, yes.
Right. So you can expect that the background checks are going to be pretty light, especially if they're planning on processing tons of people. If they're saying 500,000, this is a department. The Department of Homeland Security is bogged down with the millions of people that have crossed the border. I don't know how they're going to have time to process these or how they're going to have time to actually look into them. They're totally underwater already. Throwing hundreds of thousands of more people at them isn't going to fix anything. I mean, just parole abuse alone, excluding this new program of 550,000 people, they've paroled well over 1 million people into the country just using their CHNV parole scam, their CBP1 scam. That's over 1.5 million people now that they've brought into the country. I don't know how do we expect these people to actually do their due diligence and screen people at all.
Well, and this 500,000 number seems like a complete farce.
Yeah, who
Like
knows?
I think that number is going to be easily doubled. Personally, they like to undercount anything in this administration unless it's their spending.
Yeah,
So,
it was when we saw the rumors of this coming up, we were hearing 1.1 million from some news sources, and then all of a sudden it was 500,000. So yeah, I'd love to see the math there. You can always safely assume when an administration is giving out amnesty, their number is going to be the lowest number, the lowest potential.
I mean, this program doesn't make any sense. I mean, the president he says that this is going to have a path to citizenship. A president cannot unilaterally create a path to citizenship. The Constitution is pretty clear on this when it comes to citizenship and immigration. How does he do this?
Well, that's the trick. So if you're paroled in place under this plan, that effectively counts as an admission. There is already a path for these people, and it should be clear about that people that are here illegally that marry a U.S. citizen spouse, there's a process. There's a waiver process. There's an actual congressionally authorized legal way to do it. And by the way, absent this amnesty program, these folks are going to be generally so low on the removal. Like, I mean, these aren't people who have orders of removal. In theory, if they don't have crimes, they're not going to come in contact with ICE anyway. So they're picking who they think is the most sympathetic class of people and basically daring Republicans to stand up for the Constitution. And they need to. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's when you do that parole in place, it basically it skips over that waiver process. They don't have to go to a court and get a waiver. They don't have to return and apply there. And then they can adjust to a green card. And then from that green card comes citizenship. It's a clear path.
And call me a conspiracy theorist. To me, this looks like similar to what they did with DACA, where they're purposely creating a giant gray area in the law for a very large number of people who are then going to become indebted to the left. And as they will never be given a full legal status, they are now full-on activists for that forever. And that will just be used as a cudgel against the right. In perpetuity, similar to how DACA was against Trump. Every time there was a discussion about securing the border, the left showed up with 10,000 DACA recipients on Capitol Hill trying to storm the building, basically, and stop it. I think this is going to be used in the exact same way. And they're just preparing for a potential administration that they don't control to try and keep as many of their policies in place. And this is one of the weapons that they've created.
100%. I mean, and in addition to all the people they're giving 2 or 5 year parole now that are going to have their parole renewed, they're going to need to be renewed at some point. And is the administration going to be brave enough to cut it off? It's the same thing, but even before DACA, temporary protected status, TPS, was the same game plan. It's a thing that's supposed to be used in very limited circumstances. Like you've got a hurricane that hits your country, you're here in this country, and you obviously can't go home while that hurricane's happening. And so they give you this temporary status just so you can stay here and work for a little bit. But when it's safe to go home, you can go home. And what happens instead of us actually allowing that program to end, we continually renew it every 18 months. In perpetuity. We have some that have been going on for well over a decade. They've just not been stopped. The Trump administration tried to stop some of them, and courts sued and said they can't do that. Meanwhile, every day we're taking in tourists from that country. We're taking in non-immigrant workers, people that are coming in and then returning home. So they're coming in and returning home, and we have an entire population of people that have been here for years that say it's under a program that's deemed not safe. And those people get, not only do they come up and lobby Congress and say we've been here so long, you should give us legal status. Oftentimes, representatives from their home countries will come and lobby to not have to take their citizens home because they're getting the remittance money. They're having a benefit of not having those folks return. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they're getting the tax money without the tax liability. Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds like a good deal for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, let me get this straight. The Trump administration wasn't allowed to end programs put in place by the executive branch.
Right.
From the judiciary.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with the DACA lawsuit, right? The administration skipped the Administrative Procedures Act. It just decided to, by memo, create this unlawful program. And the Trump administration said, okay, we're going to get rid of that memo. And the Supreme Court comes back and agrees and says, because they can't do that, and says, no, you have to follow the Administrative Procedure Act to rescind a memo.
Which wasn't followed to send the memo.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just absurd.
It's almost like the system's built against us.
It's
something.
almost like it is.
So before this goes too far, I mean, this was just announced today. What can Congress do?
Congress can defund it. Congress can sue it. And we've got a DHS appropriations bill coming up next week, potentially, for a floor vote.
In the House.
Congress should defund this program. If they don't, I mean, if they're not doing that, I mean, in addition to doing that and waiting for maybe the whatever CR or whatever is going to come in the fall, they can sue. I mean, we need to have states like Texas standing up, as it has done time and time again, joining with a coalition of other states with all the attorneys general to sue to stop this program immediately.
Sounds like a good plan, and
Yeah.
it's going to take time, but we need to embolden conservatives to do the right things we all know need to be done to secure the future of this country. So building on what we've talked about, the long game, if we don't stop the crisis, it will continue and only grow.
Yep.
Said by granting an amnesty, you already said it encourages more crossings. So by not fighting this program, we are encouraging the continuing of the crisis. If any lawmaker who doesn't stand up to fight this is now part of the problem.
Yeah. And if they leave this new amnesty alone because they say to themselves, oh, gosh, this is a sympathetic population. I don't really want to put my foot down. What happens when the administration expands on that again? What did courts say when they said, they abused this authority months ago? Why didn't you stop it then? It's like Congress has to show that it's acting. Otherwise, it's effectively endorsed the program before it gets, totally out of control and expanded well beyond this class here.
Well, Grant, wrapping up, a couple questions I want to ask you. You were put in charge of the border right now. What are the three things you would do to fix the problems?
Remain in Mexico, in catch and release, do something under 212F to basically cut off the flow, shut it down. That's it. I mean, you can restart wall funding as well, but that's critical in all those other parts working together.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
I wish most of policymaking was that simple, but it really is. So what else should people know about the border crisis that you think they don't?
Something that's important to know is that we see this every month. The numbers at the border have kind of stagnated. Things have fallen off. That's a good thing. It's good that numbers are coming down off of where they were a few months ago. But what's important is that we don't accept what's going on now as the new normal. Thousands of people showing up every day. Like, even though the numbers are way down, to just over 2,000 people showing up every day. That's good. We're making progress, but it's not okay. Just back when I first started up here, Secretary Jay Johnson at DHS said at 1,000 a day, that's a crisis. That's crisis levels. We can't accept crisis levels of illegal immigration every day. You have to be reminding your members of Congress, they've got to do something about this. They can't just let it go. And they have the power to do it. They've got the power of the purse. When Congress isn't acting, it's because they're choosing not to act.
That's a great point. I'm really glad that that's what we're going to end on today is we can't let the status quo that has been established by this administration be what continues. It undermines the rule of law in this country and will just continue to lead to more chaos. We have to get things under control. We have to establish law and order, or bad consequences will follow. It's a guarantee. It's not an if.
Yep.
Thank you for joining me today, Grant.
Thanks, Matt.